My name is Joni Mountain. I'll be the service associate this morning. And with us today, we have the Reverend Dr. Tom Owen-Towle. He has been a parish minister since 1967, and he is still preaching, mainly through Zoom, all across, as we heard, from Bemidji to who knows where else. He and his life mate, Carolyn, served as co-ministers for First UU Church in San Diego for 24 years. And he was the interim minister at Summit for 2 years. He is slowly returning, even though slowly is the theme today, I'm not sure Tom does a lot slowly. So he's returning to volunteering at the homeless center, singing in nursing homes, and mentoring youth. So we are very happy to have you with us today, Tom. And now, in the spirit of worship, let us turn our minds and hearts and listen to the prelude.
Good morning. In the spirit of the topic this morning, I was looking for music about sloth, but I came up with Francois Couperin. He has 2 pieces. One is listlessness. That's the closest I could get. And then the alarm clock, which hopefully will wake us up from our listlessness. I would like to have an alarm clock like this instead of it's much more musical. And I hope you enjoy this. I'll put the names in the chat.
Thank you, Karen. Welcome again, everyone, to the Sunday service of Summit Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. We are a liberal religious community bound together by shared principles drawn from world religions, humanist teachings, nature and science, philosophy, and personal practices. We are a religion of love and inclusion. The mission of Summit is to commit ourselves to building a more just and compassionate and sustainable world. If you're new to Summit or to Unitarian Universalism and would like to know more about us, we invite you to go to our website, summituuf.org, click on the visitors button, and fill out our online connection card. Someone will follow up with you. As we do each week, we want to acknowledge that our fellowship resides on unceded Kumeyaay land, and that for more than 10,000 years, this land has been and continues to be home to the Kumeyaay people. We recognize the violent history of colonization in California and honor the legacy and continuing presence of the Kumeyaay Nation. We have an announcement this morning from our board president, Eleanor Weed.
Good morning, everybody. Happy almost end of February. Next month, we will be holding our pledge drive, our annual pledge drive, and we are hoping to have an in-gathering event on the last Saturday of March. And we're toying with two ideas, one having it in a park, and the other is setting up and having it at Summit in the parking lot and having fun and having a food truck and good stuff. And we're kind of wanting to know, which would you like? So during circle discussion, would you let me know if you're interested in one or the other? And we'll also be contacting people to look for stewards and the such for the pledge drive. And when people call, please say yes. It's a simple job. Please say yes. And thank you.
Thank you, Eleanor. This is the fourth Sunday of the month, and Rin Corbell, Chair of Social Justice in Action, has an update for us.
Thank you, Joni. So we all know the story of the celebrity who creates his own television show and ends up being president. But wait, it's not that celebrity. This celebrity plays a TV character who is a high school history teacher. The teacher passionately rails against tyranny, but he is secretly recorded by a student. The video goes viral, and teacher is suddenly elected president of Ukraine. Only in Hollywood, right? Except it wasn't in Hollywood, it was in Ukraine. And in a stunning twist of fate, more fantastical than fiction, the comic actor Volodymyr Zelensky did become president of Ukraine. And he spent his first years in office being criticized as something of a likable fool, ineffectual but harmless. And now Volodymyr Zelensky stands on the world stage as one of its most brave leaders, electing to stay and fight against the madman leader of Russia, who is attacking Ukraine and, we are told, today placed his nuclear forces on alert. Zelensky's situation is dire. He believes that Putin will kill him soon. The United States offered to extract Zelensky to safety, and he replied, "The fight is here. I need ammunition, not a ride." On Friday night, I had a chance to see and hear the wonderful author Cornel West speak about his life as a writer and African American. He spoke to us in dramatic fashion, colorful, poetic, almost ministerial in Southern Baptist style, referencing numerous authors, books, and even songwriters, Curtis Mayfield, Prince, Stephen Sondheim. He ended his talk by holding hands with his white interviewer and singing with all the audience, "I'll Fly Away." The lesson he preached, however, was how the African American, as most exemplified by Martin Luther King Jr., was able to teach us all about love. And he was speaking to me, a white man. How after 400 years of oppression here in America, 250 of which Black people were considered subhuman, not just colloquially, but legally, it was codified in our laws. And another 100 years of Jim Crow lynchings, followed by extrajudicial police shootings. How after all this, African Americans are still able to teach me how to care about one another and what true grace under fire is. These two stories of people under oppression converge this morning. What is democracy? And what does it mean to lose it or never have it in the first place? Ukraine is a sovereign nation with leaders elected by its people. Yes, he may have been a comedian, but Zelensky was chosen by the people. And today, he is no longer the fool. That title belongs to Putin. Across the pond here in the United States, our democracy, although we never were a true democracy, starting as a republic and a racist one at that, we were under a direct attack on January 6, 2021, and we are under attack today. Teachers can no longer teach history. Women of color are being attacked for being nominated to the Supreme Court. Black men are imprisoned at many, many times the rate of whites. What can we learn from the Ukrainians? What can we learn from our African Americans? Courage and grace, for starters. Summit's theme for February is widening the circle. Widening the circle is not just a metaphor. It is the title of a report compiled over 3 years by the Unitarian Universalist Commission on Institutional Change. It looks at how our UU institution is weakened by racism, no friend of democracy. And it makes recommendations on how to address and change that. The 8th Principle Collaboration Group, composed of members of the UU congregations of San Diego, is starting a months-long effort to read and examine this report with the goal of arriving at our recommendations for our own congregations members, staff, and boards to make real change. That our congregations, our faith communities, our organization, our religion, our country does not become irrelevant, does not disappear under the looming face of autocracy, fascism, and hatred. For information on how to join this group, please contact any member of the Social Justice and Action Committee or me, Rin Corbet, at rincorbet@gmail.com. Thank you.
Thank you, Rin. We're glad that all of us have chosen to be together this morning for a time of connection and reflection. I invite you to stay after the service to partake in the community gathering and give Eleanor the feedback that she would like to get, and talk to the minister about his sermon this morning. Our opening words today are from Sri Nisargadatta. Love tells me I'm everything. Wisdom tells me I'm nothing. And between the two, my life flows.
We are building a new our cry. Peace and freedom, that is our cry. Peace and freedom is our cry. Without these, this world would die. Peace and freedom is our cry.
Mary Carter Vale will light a chalice in the sanctuary this morning. And if you have a candle or a chalice at home, please light yours too. The chalice lighting is adapted from Reverend David Breeden. We gather to dream, to envision, to embody and achieve. The compassion we dream, the justice we envision, the dignity of each in an ever-growing circle of love and justice. Now we have our UU hymn, which you can sing at home while muted, followed by our UU aspiration.
Bajo el gran sol, surja speranza, fe, amor, verdad y belleza cantando de cada tierra, cada voz.
From all who dwell below the skies, let faith and hope with love arise. Let beauty, truth, and good be sung through every land by every tongue.
May love be the spirit of this fellowship. May the quest for truth be its sacrament and service be its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, and to help one another in fellowship. This is our aspiration. Yep.
Can you hear me? All right, good. I have a story for y'all today. As you may know, I love my little plushy friends. And I have a new friend for you to meet today. Ready? This is Sophia. Good morning, Sophia. Good morning. Sophia is a two-toed sloth. Two-toed, yeah. 2 in the front and 3 in the back, right? Yes, that's correct. She's a young sloth. And though this is not a real and alive sloth, they have some sloth wisdom to share with us. So today I want you to imagine that this is a baby sloth visiting with us from South America. Okay? So good morning, Sophia. I know it's sleepy time for you, and I really appreciate you being awake and talking with us today. How are you? Glad to be here. I'm feeling a bit energetic this morning. I ate a bite of the guarana fruit yesterday, and I'm speaking a bit faster than normal. I hope that's okay. Well, actually, it's really helpful for us because, we're on a schedule and we only have so much time to do our story today. Really? What's the rush? Well, we only have an hour for the service, and I just have a little time for the story. So, we have to work things in our schedule. Oh, well, that's something my mom told me about when I was learning slothy stuff. Slothy stuff? What do you mean by slothy stuff, Sophia? You know, hanging around in trees, moving slowly. My mom also told me that other species do things differently and have assumptions about sloths being lazy. She said our name sloth is used to describe a deadly sin. And there is something bad, and that's something bad. Sloths are getting a bad rap. Wow. Yeah, I can see that. Can you share something that you would like us to know about sloths? Let me share the ways of the sloth. This is what I learned from my family. Would you like to learn about the ways of the sloth? Oh, yes, please. Would very much like to learn the ways of the sloth. Okay, there are 5 ways. 1, move slowly. We live high up in the canopy, and it's very important to take your time. Oh, I can see that. Trees are really high. And if you're living in the tippy top of a tree, you do need to move slowly. Number 2, appreciate your space. There are so many beautiful things to look at if you move slowly. A leaf, a flower, the texture of the bark. We share the trees with spider monkeys sometimes, and they're always rushing around too. And they don't see the beautiful things that a sloth can see. We appreciate our space. Number 3, eat local. My canopy, my family lives in about a maybe 50 mile, like 40 square foot space. It's really small. Like the monkeys have a big range. We have a really small one. So we know every leaf and flower and fruit and vegetable, and we like to eat local. Very yummy. Number 4. Yeah, what's number 4, Sophia? Number 4 is take naps. Oh, yeah, taking naps. Sloths' bodies use the energy we get from our plants that we eat slowly, and we spend time sleeping. It's not being lazy, it's how our bodies work. Okay. I saw a sloth sleeping in a tree when I was in Brazil, and he was hanging there like a hammock. Did not move once the whole time I watched. But he was doing slothy stuff, wasn't he? Yes, that's what we do, slothy stuff. And the final one, number 5, is occasionally we check out a new view. A new view? What do you mean? Well, once a week, we climb down to the floor of the forest to relieve ourselves, and sometimes we go swimming. I have very long arms and very long legs, and it feels good to get in the water sometimes, as long as there's no piranhas around. Oh, yeah, of course. We know the best places to swim. I'm sure you do. So, wow, that's a lot of slothy things I never thought about. And the more I know about sloths, I'm getting much more interested in your life and what you do. So, is there anything else you want me to know? Yes. Sloths are not slothful. We are just moving at a different speed than other creatures, and that's okay. Thank you, Sophia, for sharing. We'll remember what you said, and now we have a deeper understanding of the creature sloths, because you came and shared with us. And the sin of sloth is not about you. something us humans have to talk about, but it's not about sloth beings, right? Exactly. Thank you for clearing up that misunderstanding. It's very important to us to be seen as who we are and to be appreciated for what we do in our slothy ways. Well, thank you again, Sophia. And we learned a lot today by talking to a sloth. So that is our story for you today. I hope you enjoyed it and you will appreciate some slothy ways.
Let us join our hearts and minds together in moments of prayer and silent meditation. Eternal Spirit of life, of love, and liberation. Our prayer is simple this morning. Be our companion, our comforter, as we endure the anguish of an ongoing pandemic, the brutality of war in Ukraine, of personal and social, racial injustices at home here in America, and our own individual sorrows. Comfort us, be our companion. And for those of us who are feeling listless and blah and need to be challenged, move us, stir us, inspire us, be our challenger. And let there be peace and unrest in all of our lives, sufficient peace to bring us serenity and calm and groundedness, but enough unrest to keep us morally awake and spiritually on our toes. Peace and unrest, unrest and peace, as we share moments of silent communion. Shalom, salam, ashe. Blessed be, namaste, and amen.
There's a river flowing in my soul. There's a river flowing in my soul, and it's telling me that I'm somebody. There's a river flowing in my soul. There's a river flowing in my heart, my heart. There's a river flowing in my heart, and it's telling me that I'm somebody. There's a river flowing in my heart. There's a river flowing in my mind, my mind. There's a river flowing in my mind, my mind. And it's telling me that I'm somebody. There's a river flowing in my mind. There's a river
We are a fellowship supported entirely by the voluntary generosity of our members and friends, and we greatly appreciate our faithful pledgers who continue to keep up their monthly contributions. We would also be most grateful if some of you would make a donation today. And it's easier than ever with our virtual plate that can be found in the chat box, and it will take you directly to the donation location. I'd also like to ask if more of you would be willing to show yourselves on the screen so that Tom has a better sense of the community to whom he's addressing. And so it would be nice to see more of your faces. So now we will gratefully accept your generous donations during the musical interlude.
I will play Wachet auf, ruf uns die Stimme, which means awake, the voice commands. It's a chorale prelude by J.S. Bach, arranged by Busoni. Wachet auf really literally translates to wake up.
I offer deep thanks to Joni, Katie, Karen, Rin, Patrick, Tyler, Dan, and the entire Summit worship crew this morning. It's always my honor and joy to return to your pulpit. Next time, hopefully in person. I want to launch with more moments of deep, prayerful silence for the Ukrainians and Russian civilians, all who are enduring a needless, self-aggrandizing, devastating war in Europe right now. But as we all know, prayer isn't enough. While we are praying, Putin is praying, Preying. So please keep your eyes and ears open for ways to support financially the refugees streaming, among other places, into Romania, the home of our Unitarian roots. Over the years, I preached about every deadly sin because I practiced them. And I consider the deadliest of the lot to be sloth. It was called the noonday demon because sloth usually struck during the heat of the day when monks were hungry and fatigued and susceptible to the suggestion that their commitments to a life of prayer wasn't worth the effort. Same noonday affliction strikes us non-monks whenever we lose faith, hope, or love. The sneaky demon whispers in our ear, hey, it isn't worth doing. Hey, the problems are too big. Hey, you're not valuable enough anyway. So give up. Give in. And this sin is particularly devastating in 2022 as we endure a global pandemic and counter domestic terrorism, as well as weather a blindsiding invasion in Ukraine. All the while trying to create a multiracial democracy for the first time in American history. Siblings, it's no time to be slothful. I'm going to first give a sketch of the sloth. As Mary said, a most fascinating and worthy animal, one which has many good things going for it. And along the way, I'll draw some parallels between the sloth and us. For starters, a sloth is an animal perpetually misunderstood and reviled by our human species. Sloths have been called chronic pacifists and hanging animal baskets. Their mentality has been termed sub-reptilian, but they're actually mammals, living most of their lives 30 to 90 feet up in the rainforests of Central and South America. The sloth is nature's super slowpoke. In the time it takes to deliver this sermon, the average sloth will have done absolutely nothing. The sloth isn't slippery or slick or slimy, just slow and sluggish, does a lot of not much, enjoys a deep sleep, 10 to 20 hours a day. Plus, some sloths are so lethargic as to be utterly unfazed by gunshots at close range. And even if a three-toed sloth were to rouse itself to its own defense, the only creature slow enough to suffer its bite, sort of a leathery kiss, would be another sloth. Talking about slowness, a patient asked the dentist, "How long, doc, will it take to pull my tooth?" "Well, only 2 seconds." "Well, how much will it cost?" "About $100. For only 2 seconds of work?" Well, I can pull it very slowly if you'd prefer." Then there was a man who complained to his tailor about delay in making a new suit. 6 weeks? I mean, the world was created in 6 days, and you're going to take 6 weeks? I know, countered the tailor, and just look at the world. Second, as leaf eaters, sloths give up everything in exchange for a permanent meal ticket. They give up muscle, for example. Only 25% of their body weight is muscle. Lack of muscle is the reason that sloths are slothful. They don't have what it takes to go any faster. But our human institutions ain't the swiftest enterprises either, right? Government is notorious for much talk and little walk, and our current Congress stands stalemated most of the time. How shameful. And religious outposts have rarely been eager to welcome the outcast, clothe the naked, educate the illiterate, visit the imprisoned, or feed the hungry. Yes, even Unitarian Universalists. Our moral as well as our physical muscles are flabby to accomplish some of the pressing tasks facing us humans daily. Third, that the sloth hangs around, hangs on, and hangs upside down. On the ground where they seldom travel, the sloths drag themselves along on their bellies, looking like humans dying in the desert just short of the water hole. But hanging motionless under a branch requires little energies, especially as sloths can lock their hook-like claws in place and concentrate on the more important business of sleeping and eating. Their grip is so tenacious that they remain hanging in place even after death. At times, researchers have had to saw off the branch to which the animal was attached to bring down a sloth. Same story exists with some of us anthropoids, right? Our grip on this prejudice or that resentment can become so tight that we go to the grave with clenched fists rather than open hands. Fourth, the sloth is a master camouflager. Although a grayish animal, the sloth in native habitat is greenish, harmonizing with the moss and foliage due to fungus or algae growing on it. Yeah, we can't weasel out of that comparison either, can we? How often do we humans find ourselves merging indistinguishably with our setting, failing to stand up or stand out as brave, just, compassionate leaders, whether at home or in the workplace, play or in the public domain? Chameleon-like, we switch our colors from green to brown to red to blue to purple, depending upon where we are and with whom we sit. I know I do. Now, before trying to convince you that sloth is a deadly sin, perhaps the deadliest of them all, it should be noted that the sloth is an animal with many useful habits and traits, as Mary delineated. Isn't that the case with all 7 deadly sins? I mean, there's a positive dimension to anger. And there's a positive dimension even to lust and avarice and pride and the rest. These qualities house creative kernels, but in excessive form, they become debilitating. So first, let's hear it for the advantages of being a sloth. Immobility is a virtue. Their stillness is their best defense, making them harder to see. In the crotch of a tree, arms folded across its chest, the sloth resembles a bunch of dead leaves. The sloth reminds us human sisters and brothers that there's surely a time to be immobile, still, and disguised during the course of our lives. And second, the sloth is strangely quite a generous and accommodating animal for a vast group of specialized insects living in its hair. Sloths harbor 9 species of moths, 6 species of beetles, 6 species of ticks, as well as other assorted mites, and receives frequent visits from itinerant mosquitoes and sandflies. I mean, would that we humans were as accommodating hosts upon occasion. A little bit of radical hospitality would go a long ways, particularly as we're thinking about Afghani refugees, Ukrainian refugees. Third, the sloth is an excellent swimmer. I mean, the gut gives it extra buoyancy, right? I mean, that fits some of us too. Fourth, sloths mate while hanging from a branch. I won't attempt any comparisons on that habit. But finally, sloths avoid putting excessive pressure on any single species by exploiting a variety of trees. They eat the leaves of at least 90 species of trees and vines, and different ones prefer different species. They've adapted harmoniously to their environment. So as you can see, these masters of digestion and champions of sleep and gurus of the pendulous loafing life have so much to recommend themselves. But moving from this portrait of the sloth as an animal, we need to look at sloth as a sin. In the Middle Ages, the religious leaders listed 7 deadly sins, which I guess they thought to be the most interesting and original of our human blunders. Their list holds up pretty well for us moderns: pride, covetousness, gluttony, lust, anger, envy, and sloth are still potential roadblocks to spiritual growth. But when you note the sizzling 7 sins, you wonder, I mean, how did sloth ever slither into such juicy company? I'm not sure how it was canonized as a deadly sin, but I've got my strong hunches and I want to share them today. Sloth is deadly because it renders us morally listless and spiritually apathetic. At least in the other sins, you're still kicking, you're bouncing, you're vigorous. In slothfulness, you're stuck at being an upside down, limb hanging, fungus covered entity. Sloth's a sin because it gives rise to torpor of mind, slumber of feeling, and sluggishness of conscience. Sloth puts us on the road toward dejection, faint-heartedness, and a lack of desire for doing much of anything worthwhile. We just won't make much of a difference in 2022. So guess what? We don't march. We don't protest. We don't even vote. We sloth around. Now, a quick glance at biblical history shows us something quite startling. We like to characterize the biblical sinners as persons with overweening pride. But the truth is, most were individuals who had too little confidence rather than too much. It was their timidity, their cowardice that let the sly serpent seduce them into a state of slothfulness. The Bible is a story of women and men like you and I who didn't attempt too much. We tried too little. They were beings who didn't try to be gods, but failed to be humans. As legend has it, we were created in God's image and were created to have dominion over the reaches of the globe, till its gardens, name its animals, and live lovingly with other creatures. But we turn the offer down. We were indifferent to Yahweh's invitation. We waddled away from our charge and responsibility. We blew it. We still do. Look at the dire state of our American democracy and global ecosphere. Now, after the fall, being slothful came rather easy for us. Moses tries to chicken out of being God's rep because he wasn't eloquent. Then there was Gideon, scared to answer God's call because he felt unqualified and clumsy. And Jonah comes along with a doozy of an excuse, not wanting to risk his own hide by preaching to the enemy camp. And the Christian scriptures find humans willing to sloth around too. In the parable of the talents, the stewards are given talents, opportunities, abilities, call them what you will, and simply asked to use what you've got, where you are, and in your time. But one guy loses his by burying it. And the Nazarene calls him a wicked and slothful servant because he didn't risk his resources, didn't use what he had and who he was. And right now in 2022, we can grow emotionally stale and spiritually blocked. In short, expiring while we're alive. As Unitarian Norman Cousins used to say, the real tragedy in life is what dies inside us while we're still alive. In the course of a lengthy tribute, a minister paused, bent over the wreath of flowers, pointed to the draped casket below, and with lowered voice and an exceedingly solemn face observed, "Ladies and gentlemen, dearly beloved of the Lord," and she thrust her finger downward, "this corpse was a member of our congregation for 25 years. And you, lady, could readily point your fingers as well toward us clergy." Can you begin to feel that full-blown slothfulness is truly deadly? Because it deadens us while we need to be open to ideas and awake to principles and inspired to service. When we need to be alive, it's a sin of omission, a sin of neglect. We avoid the very things we ought to do. We especially neglect our neighbors. We pass by on the other side, partly out of pride, but mainly out of sloth. Increasingly in our society, we rarely lift a finger for the poor and downtrodden. We point fingers. Our technology and gadgets have freed us from most drudgery. And what do we do with the time available to us? We often turn inward and become absorbed in our own egos and techie equipment and sloth around yet some more. The point of religion, especially the one to which we've signed on, Unitarian Universalism, is to yank us out of this deadly, deadening malaise of sluggishness. Summit Unitarian Universalist Fellowship exists primarily to remind us of our inherent worth and dignity and our lifelong challenge to serve the highest and holiest we know. Our Unitarian Universalist faith, rather than driving us to our knees in contrition, raises us to our feet in empowerment, filling us with courage to effect moral change rather than languishing upside down in safe surroundings. I often think, as in my home stretch years, I'm sitting in the living room and each of our 7 grandchildren prayed into the living room one at a time, and also our current great grandchild. We'll probably have more by the time I'm sitting there in the living room, but one by one they asked me, Grandpa, in what ways did your life matter? In what ways did your life matter? And then if I'm up to it, after I've shared and stumbled, I'll ask them, in what ways, dear ones, might your lives still matter? How is our religion an enlivening antidote to slothfulness? First, our faith says that we're bona fide heretics. I mean, literally choice makers for all of life's delimiting factors, and there's tons of them. We are ultimately the determiners of our own destiny. We are morally responsible for every wrong which we have the power to help prevent, be it global warming, abridgment of human rights at home or abroad, emotional abuse in our own households, or just plain old lethargy in our daily lives. Our progressive religion is grounded in two major beliefs. Number one, the future can be better than the present. And number two, you and I hold considerable responsibility and power to make it so in both personal and public ways. I mean, when the proverbial judgment day comes, you and I will be asked, were you willing to participate in minor or major ways, matters not. Were you willing to participate in the moral struggles of your place and your season? Sloths answer, well, I had just never got around to it. And servants say, I tried my best and gave it my all. Here's the way Wes Nisker, the sage Buddhist comedian, puts it. Hey, have a nice millennium. And if you don't like the news, go out and make some of your own. Sound religion doesn't allow us to hide out or slide out of institutional commitment. When we join Summit, we're spiritually bound to support it generously. That's what being a stakeholder means. The willingness through thick and thin, in pandemic and out of pandemic, to carry rather than merely be carried, to shoulder our fair share, and to do so gratefully and joyously. Sloths hide out, hard to find them. Stewards show up, raise their hands, and contribute responsibly of our gifts and resources. The choice is clear and it's always ours. Remember, we're heretics. We're choice makers. Our religion also pulls us out of a slothful slump by reminding us that a little bit of goodness and love goes a long, long way toward bettering this universe. Because we can't do everything, sloths tend to do nothing. Something is the answer. Something is the answer. Your something and my something adds up to something very powerful. I know few of us can change the world substantially during our tenure on Earth, but most of us can change it far more than we ever dream. Instead of trying to move mountains, start by shoveling some dirt around. Our progressive faith won't let us give out or give up. The only way, Unitarian Universalism says, to counter a persistent evil is with a persistent good. The only way to overcome slothfulness is with a faith that remains fresh and frisky. Our religion is realistic. We're not likely to eliminate poverty or racism or sexism. But we're called to chase them all the way to our grave. We're never permitted to quit on justice or quit on compassion. Never permitted to quit on justice or quit on compassion. So onward, siblings, onward, tenderly and doggedly onward.
From the light of days remembered burns a beacon bright and clear, guiding hands and hearts and spirits into faith set free from fear. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion meet to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin. From the stories of our living brings a song both brave and free, calling pilgrims still to witness to the life of liberty. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion meet to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin. From the dreams of youthful vision comes a new prophetic voice, which demands a deeper justice built by our courageous choice. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion meet to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin.
Our benediction comes to us from the Talmud. Do not be daunted by the enormity of the world's grief. Do justly now. Do mercy now. Walk humbly now. You are not obligated to complete the work, but neither are you free to abandon it.
As we come to the close of our service, I invite you to stay for the time of community gathering and invite you to come back next week when Reverend Owen-Towle will be in the pulpit. And now we extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.